labour behind the label, and also the sponsor. But actually, I'm the sponsor. So I'm going to now shift to another room and tell you why it is that I'm prepared to stump up my £200 to support this project and to get the ball rolling. Well, 10 years ago, the Fair Trade Foundation was a twinkle in somebody's eye, but what we've seen happening is something moving that whole idea of equitable trade from the margins to the mainstream. But 10 years ago, we found the Fair Trade Foundation we all now know, small, struggling local organisations like Labour Behind the Label is today. For me, I've been involved in the fair trade cotton issue, and I know how important and also how complicated that whole area is. But in relation to fair trade, that fair trade only applies to the basic cotton and to the farmers who produce it, not to the supply chain who get us all that cheap clothes here for people to buy. I was going to say for me to buy, because I hope I don't. And that is basically where Labour Behind the Label can come in. They are working in Honduras, in India, and also in Marks and Spencer's and outside Primark to change this whole way in which we buy clothes that are exploiting people in other parts of the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anna, and I'm delighted to be here tonight to tell you a bit more about Labour Behind the Label. I'd like to introduce you to someone else as well. This is Mirza. Mirza is a garment worker, seamstress, who works in a factory in the Gagarin region of India, which is the second largest garment producing region in India. She works very long hours at the factory, supplying for export brands including Gap. Her life is quite typical of a garment worker. She lives in a small one-room tenancy with her 4 children, which has communal toilets which are shared with the 20 other units in the block and a washing area in the passageway. Her life is quite a struggle for Mirza. She earns around 4,500 rupees a month, which is about £2 a day perhaps. But she needs around double this in order to live a decent quality of life. And by a decent quality of life, I don't mean anything excessive. I mean enough to buy food, enough to have shelter, enough to clothe her children. This picture here is of her giving her daughter a hairband, which her school has told her that she has to wear. This created real problems for the family budget, as a decision to make this purchase meant that they had to make sacrifices in other areas, which just seems ludicrous. So, sweatshops. It's one of the biggest problems facing UK consumers today. We all buy from high street retailers, all of us, or even from more niche brands, but the story behind all of these clothes is actually that they were made in the same factories, niche brands and high street brands alike. And across the board, the female garment workers who are making our clothes are being exploited. There's no question about it. Poverty wages, excessive working hours, no right to join a trade union. So, what does Labour Behind the Label do about it to make a difference? Well, we're a campaign which supports garment workers around the world in the struggle to improve their rights. And we do this in 2 ways. Firstly, over the last decade, we've built up a network of communications with workers' representatives and labour rights groups in every country where clothes are made. And we support their action through our Urgent Actions network, our Urgent Actions system. So, say there's a dispute in a factory and garment workers haven't been paid for 6 months, or the union leaders have been fired for no reason, then the organisers might get in contact with us, and then if it's a UK brand, we'll get in contact with the brands and we'll lobby them and say, what are you doing about this? There's something happening in your factory, this is really bad, can you do something about it? And then we'll try and get our supporters involved as well, and then they can also take action and stand up for the rights of these workers. So we do that, and then secondly, we also have public campaigns, and we use the issues that we find out through the Urgent Action system to do public demonstrations, to do media work, to hold store actions, to talk to companies and meet with companies and write reports. And we've got a network of supporters who are both old and young, who realise that this is a vitally important issue and work with us to call for change. So, does it work? Well, absolutely. Last year we worked on a case in a sportswear factory where the company had closed the factory because they fired all of the workers because they thought that the union was getting too strong and that they thought that then that was a threat to the factory. That's an abuse of human rights. It's in the Declaration of Human Rights that people have a right to organise in the workplace. And hundreds of our supporters across the UK got involved in this, and they sent online email actions to the brand, and it made a big hit in the media. And because of that, the brand actually went back on what had happened, and they reopened the factory, and they re-employed and reimbursed the workers for the time that they'd been fired, which was a huge victory. And actually, that was something which wouldn't have happened if supporters hadn't been involved in lobbying for this case. The second thing, another one of our successes is something called the Let's Know Fashion Report, where we profile 25 top high street retailers and the work that they're doing to increase wages in their supply chains. Since its first publication in 2006, we've done 4 editions of it. We've seen the numbers of companies doing concrete work on the ground to increase wages rise from 4 to 11, which actually is a really good thing. So, yeah, but there's still a long way to go. So now we come to the piece of work that I really need your help to carry out. Stories about workers such as Mercer need to be heard by companies and need to be heard in the press and by consumers. So we want to do a piece of action research in the Gurgaon region of India into the wages that are being paid and the discrepancy between that and the amount needed to live a decent quality of life. We want to demonstrate what the real problem is. Gurgaon is one of the worst regions in India. Like Gap, Topshop, Primark and Marks & Spencer are all sourcing there. So we'd hope to find factories used by these brands, carry out the work and compile a report. And the report would show the wage gap and show how change can be brought about in the area. And we've launched the report in the UK with a press stunt and use it to influence companies to bring about change for the victims of the fashion industry. And our experience shows that this sort of exposure really does bring about a tangible change, because companies listen to reports and they listen to the press. So we need your help to do that, because research costs. It costs to pay for partner fees, to gather the data, staff time with writing it, it costs to print it, and overall we need around £5,000 in order to be able to do it. But if we just break that down a bit, one person's donation could help us to have the staff time to get media coverage for it. So I really encourage you to give in any way